frame it differently, my few comments, and I want to basically hypothesize uh, why Gaza has taken place in the context of our geopolitics and the existing environment, and then try and see what are the possible ways out, or what are the difficulties that the world, or at least the Gazans, are facing. I'd like to begin with the changes in the US policy that we may have discerned over the last some decades, or maybe at least one decade. And foremost of those has been that the US has critically and particularly focused on keeping its alliance with the NATO, reinforcing that alliance with the NATO. And this was something that went missing during the times of Trump, and Trump was Make America Great Again. Biden, ever since he came, has obviously been focusing on that. The other element or the alliance that they have actually focused on, they want to reinforce and re-strengthen that and bring it back into the frame, is Israel, the relationship with Israel. So these two perhaps are the most critical interests that the US foreign policy currently pursues, NATO and Israel. And they want to make sure that the geographic domains of NATO especially are retained, and the threat that they find from Russia, whether in Ukraine or anywhere else, is of course checked. That is their basic interest. Now, one more interest can be contained, of course, brought about, and they've stated that very clearly, and they see that as a threat, is containing China in different ways and means, but yes, that is also one of the aspects. I don't think containing Russia for them is a big problem. Russia is now a par there to see, but we tend to conflate too much of Russia and China together to pose the second front, so to say, in the geopolitics of the world as the global politics emerges. To my mind, Russia remains and plays second fiddle to China in the foreseeable future. I don't see Russia making that kind of an impact on the global scene where it can unilaterally either threaten or disturb the balance of the world as it exists today. There are some tertiary interests also. So when the US wants to actually pursue these interests, it must do some other things. And those other things are outsourcing the responsibility of the rest of the world to countries that they think can take over that responsibility. And Israel figures very importantly in that, especially their initiative where they've made Israel create relations with the Muslim nations. And so that was an initiative that obviously was meant to bring about solid footing for Israel within the Muslim world. That was a very important part. And I think they've tried to do that. They've done it very successfully, and amongst, at least in some of the nations. As far as the control over the near Middle East is concerned, and in that, then we look at China, Pakistan, Iran, etc. Iran, of course, figures out very prominently. And containing BRI in terms of China's interest, I don't think is a very key trigger. It's just going to be a derivative benefit if it ever emerges like that. So this strategy to outsource to other people is perhaps the main driver or the trigger of what you see happening in Israel or in the Middle East in terms of the Gazan war. Israel's relations with Saudi Arabia are the key to making the entire Muslim world follow the footsteps of Saudi Arabia. And they understand that's the center of gravity. If they can somehow manage that center of gravity and make it happen for Saudi Arabia and for Israel, then Israel has almost a good amount of impact in the Middle East. And we keep in mind, and this will be discussed, how Saudi Arabia wants to move on from Orientalism to a more progressive and developmental socio-economic system. So when you look at that, then obviously the country, they need support from everybody, China inclusive, but why not Israel? And Israel can be very relevant in that sense in terms of providing that agriculture and technology and that kind of innovation that is needed in what MBS kind of people want to look at in terms of Middle East. So that is the key, joining Israel and Saudi Arabia together. Now, if Saudi Arabia must come into that fold with Israel and create that breakthrough for the rest of the Muslim world, like Pakistan and Indonesia and rest of the countries, to also follow suit and create a relationship of some kind, we are holding on actually, thinking of one day when Saudi Arabia recognizes Israel, then probably we'll follow suit immediately after or sometime after. But anyway, so that is the key. Now, for that to happen, if that ever happens, it will grant the freedom of action for Israel to not only be economically most dominant, it also will be, obviously along with that, militarily as well as in terms of politically dominant there. And that piece of the land, which we call Middle East, can then be handed over to Israel, and Israel effectively takes up the responsibility that the US has till date done. Saudi Arabia needs a peaceful environment for itself to grow. And what is it that bothers Saudi Arabia? I think Iran bothers Saudi Arabia the most at this point of time. And what are the tenets of Iran that exist in the world? There is Hamas, there is Hezbollah, there are the Houthis. Then, of course, Saudi Arabia would like to have some sort of a Palestinian solution so that it can take it to the world and say, look, I didn't just give in to the Israeli or the American demands. Actually, I have provided something or delivered something to you in terms of the Muslim world in getting a Palestinian state. So two-state solution is also part of Israel making a comeback into the Middle East. And however, for that to happen, Iran must be checked in its own shoes. And its spread and its influence must be taken care of. That brings me to the point why or how Hamas may have been provoked into doing what it did, and then starting a possibility of creating a situation where Israel is going to war with Hamas. When will it finish? I think when Israel and the US think, or Saudi Arabia think that Hamas is not totally eliminated. Will it also mean getting Hezbollah into it? Yes, they're trying their best to get Hezbollah somehow involved so that they can do 2 in 1. And not only Hamas, but Hezbollah can also be taken care of. And that will lower the weight of Iran considerably in the world. If that can happen, Saudi Arabia can rest peacefully. And they can find that particular liberty of action or freedom of space where they can actually try and develop the way that MBS envisages. Iraq and Syria have been taken care of in so many ways, and so that influence of Iran has also been catered for. As we know, Turkey was invited into Saudi Arabia to ameliorate, a lot of that Muslim sentiment. Similarly, Syria was recently also in Iran, in Saudi Arabia. So that to me is how the entire thing comes out. Now I come to the final point about the two-state, because that also is going to be delivered by Saudi Arabia through or on behalf of Saudi Arabia. And how, to my mind, it emerges is, and I've written about it in a few pieces that I do write sometime, it is in the shape of the West Bank actually being the Palestinian state and not Gaza. Now, this might happen incrementally and not right away. It will not be one blow solution to everything. But half of Gaza is gone. The Israelis are going to stay there for a while, and the rest half will gradually be reduced to assimilation within the Israeli territorial identification. That makes Israel a much more geographically defined space, much more easier to defend, militarily as well as politically. So to my mind, if not today, in 20 years, 15 years, 25 years, the Gazans the remaining Palestinians in Gaza might say, enough for us, and we like to now spread out, unfortunately, as Israelis have been spread for so many decades in their history in the past. That might happen. Or what they could do is that they could create the West Bank as the enclave, the Palestinian state, and ask Palestinians or ask the West Bankers to try and get them in, who all want Hamas reduced considerably or totally. It includes the Palestinian Authority as well. So look at the dynamics, how they are all, to my mind at least, they keep merging up, and how it all seems to be getting together. And finally, when this two-state solution is delivered, it shall be in the US, under Biden, with Mr. Netanyahu on one side, and with the Palestinian Authority on the other side, maybe by the presence of MBS also in that frame of picture, and you will have peace delivered to the world by the hands of these 3, 4, 5 people. In the meanwhile, of course, the collateral will continue to happen. The Gazans or the Palestinians will keep dying, the children will keep dying, the women will keep dying, which is simply collateral damage in my sense. But what that does to Mr. Biden, it gives him a trophy, 4 months short or 6 months short of his elections, which he is at the moment in his ratings bound to lose. So if this can be delivered to him just as OBL was delivered to Mr. Obama, I think that makes the story